with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Tuesday, June the 23rd. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, UK airstrikes alongside the United States. The UK has carried out a second joint attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen overnight. Are we being dragged into a deeper conflict? Our Home and Security editor Mark White has more.
Well, the US and the UK have said that they intended for these airstrikes to be limited, but the Houthi rebels clearly did not get the memo, because there have been 12 separate Houthi attacks on shipping since the initial strikes on January the 11th.
Battered Britain after the impact of Storm Isha. Brace yourselves for Storm Joslin.
And a Rwanda blow for Rishi Sunak. Last night, the House of Lords voted for a motion to delay ratifying the government's new treaty with Rwanda. What a surprise. What exactly does this mean? We're going to find out.
And winter freeze. There are warnings 2 million people could have their gas and electricity cut off this winter because they can't afford to pay their prepayment meter. We're going to have the citizens' advice here to let you know what to do if you are affected.
And streamlined postal service. Royal Mail has said that it would like to deliver post Monday to Friday only, but Rishi Sunak says that he would not support the change. In an email age, is it simply time to accept a second-class postal service?
Already got one of those. Alzheimer's breakthrough. A new blood test that detects the disease up to 15 years before a patient shows symptoms could be used to screen all over 50s in the future. Here's the question. Would you want to know if Alzheimer's was looming for you? Sure I would.
No,
sure I would.
I would not want to know. Not unless they could say, right, if you've got Alzheimer's coming in 15 years, you can definitely stop it by doing this. You can definitely mitigate it by doing that.
I mean, there are drugs coming on to slow it down, but 15 years knowing, it's almost like a death sentence hanging over you. And,
no.
So what do you think?
Yeah,
do you want to know?
gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address, and we've got some really brilliant little stories on our panel debates this morning as well. Some really fascinating little insights, aren't there, into all sorts of things. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us until midday. First, though, here is Tatiana Sanchez with your news.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. British strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen are designed to send a clear message. That's according to the Foreign Secretary. British aircraft used precision-guided bombs to strike several targets near an airfield in the capital, Sana'a. The UK and the US have been patrolling areas in the Red Sea after a spate of attacks on commercial ships by Iranian-backed militants. Lord Cameron says the UK is following its words with strong action.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taking.
Israel has proposed a 2-month ceasefire in Gaza in return for the release of all hostages. The US news outlet Axios reports the proposal made via Qatari and Egyptian mediators does not include an agreement to end the war. It comes after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak spoke to US President Joe Biden yesterday regarding the need to bring down civilian casualties in Gaza and increase the flow of humanitarian aid. Israel's defense forces announced that 24 of its soldiers have been killed in Gaza, its deadliest day since the start of the war with Hamas. Back here, another storm is sweeping across Britain, bringing fresh disruption for commuters just a day after Storm Isha. The Met Office says Storm Joslin will bring strong winds, with amber and yellow alerts issued for much of the country. Yellow warnings for rain and ice are also in place across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. TransPennine Express is among several companies warning of disruption. It's urging passengers to avoid travelling between England and Scotland from 3 o'clock this afternoon. And a new weight loss pill designed to make people feel fuller is now available via the NHS. The treatment can be delivered in 15 minutes in the form of a capsule that contains a gastric balloon filled with water. It requires no surgery, endoscopy or anaesthesia. Allurion, which is the company behind the pill, says it's been in talks with the NHS about rolling out the treatment since it was approved in 2020. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It is 9:35.
Well, it's only been in the House of Lords for 5 minutes, and guess what? Their lordships and their ladyships inflicted the first defeat on the Rwanda plan.
That's right. They voted against the ratification of the new treaty with Rwanda by 214 votes to 171.
It's a delaying technique. It's not binding. The charge was led by the Right Reverend Rachel Treweek. She's the Bishop of Gloucester, the first ever woman bishop, who says a few pieces of paper in a treaty will not make Rwanda safe. The same bishop who in 2015, when she became a bishop, said, God is not a he or a she, God is God. How does she know?
Well, look, I think we have to also make it... She wasn't the only one.
No.
She wasn't the only one. There was 100 and whatever else.
Well,
270,
yeah.
Thank you, who voted against them. But this was, I suppose, there was a terrible inevitability about this, and depending on whether you think the House of Lords is a good thing or not, they are either there to check our democracy, to have a sanity check for some of these things, or they're just going to ruin any sense of democracy because they are going against the people who have been elected by this country to make these decisions on your behalf. I think I know which side of that divide you sit on.
They drive me nuts. And I do not know why there are bishops in the House of Lords anyway. There are 26 Anglican bishops in the House of Lords, including the Archbishop of Canterbury. Why are there no Roman Catholic bishops?
Maybe, but maybe that sort of religious, open-hearted, warm, putting humanity at the centre of decisions. Maybe we need these people.
No, they should stick to their job and try and work out why their flock has shrunk by about 100% in the last 10 years because of useless, hand-wringing Liberals like the Bishop of Gloucester. That's why. And the Archbishop of Canterbury. Tabling amendments on Rwanda. Hopeless. He's hopeless.
Hopeless is the word, though, isn't it, when it comes to this issue of Rwanda, because I don't know about you at home, you probably share our frustration. In a way, you just want to go...
Get on with it.
Just get on with it. Just do something. But it's now looking like this won't be, even if it is ratified through all the stages, it won't be until Easter. It won't be... Nothing will be decided for months now.
And then there'll be a legal challenge, because we know, because the Great Human Rights Brigade, funded by us through Legal Aid, will be falling all over it.
Yeah. Well, let us know your thoughts. I think we probably do know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com. It's how do we not feel completely despondent about this issue?
No,
because we want something to be done about it.
Let's talk about something else that I find slightly galling. The 10th named storm this winter. We should have a competition. Anyone remember the name of the 8th or the 7th? This one is called Storm Joslin. It's on its way to hit the UK.
So heavy rains and strong winds are expected, and the Met Office...
What, in January?
...has issued a danger to life alert. As the storm brews, we have to take danger to life alerts very seriously, don't we?
We do.
Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, and reporter Jack Carson. Good morning, Dougie. Where are you? And, well, what's the weather like?
Well, I'm on the main road just outside Carryduff. This is the main thoroughfare into Belfast from Saintfield, Downpatrick, Crossguard. Of course, it is blocked here by a tree. You can see it behind me, and the electricity board is just about to start lifting that tree. The damage done from the storm last night, and the weather is starting to rain quite heavily once more. And if we just walk up a little bit, we'll see this tree getting removed here. Yeah, because our Forestry Commission is on strike, public sector strikes here, and there's nobody here to cut up these trees. So the electricity board, because right beside me and running over my head here were lines that were brought down by this tree, so they've decided to push the tree. There you go, they're pushing the tree out of the road as we go. And yeah, well, they're going to be a bit ignorant with it, to be honest, but they need to get at these electric lines just up above the tree that'll allow the engineers to replace electric and put those homes on back on the other side of this. There's 6 transformers in there in that next line, which will run off into the rural countryside. Now, we are having another storm that's coming tonight. It's due in about 3 o'clock this afternoon. And if they don't get the mess cleared that's happened first, well, then they're going to be behind the 8 ball the whole way through.
OK, Dougie, thank you so much. Let's go to Jack Carson. Is there anything as exciting where you are, Jack? In Porthcawl, I think you are, aren't you, in Wales? And why haven't you got such a fabulous GB News coat like Dougie Beattie there? I want one of those.
No, I want one as well. It's probably warmer than what I've got on, but it's certainly really windy here in Porthcawl. Now, the yellow weather warning for wind for this part of South Wales comes in from around 12 o'clock today, so it's already pretty windy now, but really expecting a lot higher winds. In parts of North Wales yesterday, as part of Storm Isha, we saw around Snowdonia 90-mile-an-hour winds, which, you know, pretty damaging for this part of the year and to different parts of this country, with many fallen trees along the roads. Also, we had disruption yesterday on Transport for Wales on that network, particularly between Swansea and Shrewsbury. Still major delays around Llandudno as well today. So again, for people that are travelling on the railway networks, really urging them to check before you travel, particularly in England as well, because of Anti-West Coast and Transpennine urging people not to travel past 3:33, 3 o'clock between England and Scotland. Of Anti-West Coast saying they are urging passengers to avoid heading anywhere north of Preston after 3:30 today, with the last train leaving the capital from London to Glasgow today expected to be very, very busy. So not as many major disruptions so far today as Storm Joslin starts to hit this part of the country as there was yesterday with Storm Isha. We saw greenhouses that had flown onto train tracks and all different kinds of disruption across all of the road and railway networks. And in the northwest, particularly as well, Electricity Northwest had 55,000 homes without power. The update we've got from them this morning is that they've managed to restore power to all but 2,000 of those. They are offering as well free catering vans for those people still affected. So still some thousands of homes in parts of the country affected without power so far, as of course we await the arrival of Storm Joslin.
Thank you both, Dougie and Jack. Thank you so much. Great job out there. It's all very well for us sat here in the warm, kind of laughing at how ridiculous it is that the UK can't cope with a bit of wind and rain.
And if you're in Scotland, every ScotRail train service has been cancelled today. That's real disruption.
Listen, we live in the UK, the weather is bad. Why don't the councils, why aren't those trees trimmed so they're not all falling into the road at the slightest gust of wind?
It's hopeless, and I'm sure the weather was... Maybe that's my getting older. It used to be a lot worse, the weather. Winters were a lot worse. We had a lot more snow.
We just don't have...
When did your kids last build a snowman in the garden?
It was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? It was. I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a really good. They loved it. We had a very snowy kind of February time, I think it was. But we seem to be getting worse at coping. We're being bombarded all the time. The weather's getting worse. Climate change. OK, so let's prepare. Let's trim the trees. Let's get the train lines.
It would probably help if people in the public sector, local government, central government, went to work, rather than working from home.
Yeah.
I'm sure it makes a difference.
Let us know your thoughts. Maybe we're being a bit harsh. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. So, the UK and the US have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen.
This is what the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, had to say.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taking.
When I hear him, I look at him, he looks and sounds like what he used to be, the Prime Minister. Now, I had a lot of issues with David Cameron as Prime Minister, but you never doubted. He had the authority, he carried himself well, he walked in a room, you knew Cameron had arrived. He does speak with distinction.
Yes, and...
Hello, Matt White.
Even though...
Hello.
Matt White, Home Security Editor. Even though he's an irritating retread.
Unelected.
And Cameron did... look, Sunak said we'd had, in his party conference speech, we'd had 30 years of useless misfiring government. 6 weeks later, he brought back one of the blokes who'd headed one of those governments for 6 years.
Well, listen, not only does he, as you said there, have that natural authority...
He does.
He's the one that's been put front and centre to talk about this actually very significant escalation that you would have thought perhaps the Prime Minister should have been in front of the cameras this morning to talk about, because David Cameron said it there in that interview that he gave. Since those intended limited strikes that we took part in on the 11th of January, the Houthis have continued attacking shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, 12 separate attacks on ships, which has brought about this second wave of attacks. Now, clearly, that intention to be limited is being foiled by what the Houthis are continuing to do, which is to, basically ignore that bloody nose that they're getting from the US and the UK, and potentially we're being sucked into a deeper conflict.
And isn't that what their Iranian paymasters, Mark, want them to do? Iran called the tune here because they're paying for the missiles. It's their military hardware.
Of course, it's confusion and chaos, and whatever they can do to shake up the Western world order is what they are doing. We see it from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon as well, getting involved in what's happening in Gaza, from Hamas as well, of course, also funded and supported by Iran, and all of the associated groups around Iraq and Syria that have upped their campaigns against the US at the moment.
Just remind our viewers, Mark, it's easy to forget why this started in the first place in the Red Sea.
Well, the Houthis say the reason they were targeting shipping is because of what's happening in Gaza. They say it was in support of the Palestinian people. The ships that they were targeting were either directly owned by Israel or they were coming to and from Israel. However, that's widened out now since the US and the UK targeted the Houthis directly. They've now said that UK and US ships are also on their target list as well, and indeed they have been struck since the 11th of January.
But they were just going for any ship that was in the Red Sea, weren't they?
Well, yes, I think these links were very tenuous, to say the very least.
They're trying to disrupt international
What that has done, though, is given the Houthis some real popular support amongst Arab populations, not amongst Arab governments as such, but certainly amongst the population base, who see what they're doing actually as quite heroic, coming to the aid of the people of Palestine. And in terms of the conflict in Gaza, it is raging on. We had just yesterday the single biggest loss of life that was inflicted on the Israeli military, with 21 IDF soldiers killed. They were trying to blow up 2 buildings. They were laying explosives to take out 2 buildings linked to Hamas. pass when a rocket-propelled grenade was fired in their direction,
and you see,
set off that prematurely.
And viewers at home might be going, well, it's miles away. What does this matter to us? Well, I think the key issue here at the moment for us is that, as of today, Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, Next, they've all said we're going to be giving higher prices. We're going to have to charge our customers more because there's about 2,500 ships which are taking these lengthy detours to avoid the Houthi militants in the Red Sea. It handles about 12% of global sea trade, doesn't it, that route? And so these ships and this stock is stuck and then having to take more expensive routes round. That is going to affect all of us.
It's adding about an extra 10 days to the journey, isn't it?
It's a perfectly good and valid argument for potentially going after the Houthis. But having said that, you know, France, Germany, many other countries that also benefit from this shipping have decided they're not going to strike the Houthis direct. They're not going to get involved potentially in a bloody and maybe a long campaign. But what they're doing is sending ships down to protect shipping going through that lane. But yes, it does. You know, it is without a doubt having not just the an effect on the extra fuel, etc., that they're having to put in these ships for that 10,000-mile detour, but also insurance prices are absolutely going through the roof at the moment.
But the right to free navigation is a very important one.
It is.
Which is what Britain and America are trying to defend.
But other countries are involved in trying to ensure there is a right to free navigation by defending the ships going through, not necessarily taking part in strikes that could suck us into a deeper conflict.
All right, we're going to hear from you a bit later.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Now, voters in New Hampshire, it's a big one. This is head to the polls. But the results be coming in at 1 a.m. in the morning as Donald Trump faces his last big Republican opponent, Nikki Haley, after Ron DeSantis dropped out and endorsed him yesterday.
That's right. The former US President Trump is hoping to deliver the ex-governor a knockout blow, clearing his path to the Republican nomination. So joining us now. Sorry. US political analyst Eric Ham. Morning, Eric.
Good morning.
Good morning. Great to see you. So it's just going to be a shoo-in for Trump, this, isn't it? He might as well just coast it tonight and be his usual self.
Well, it's certainly looking like that's a possibility. We know Nikki Haley has been wanting a one-on-one matchup with Donald Trump for quite some time. She now has it, but with all the polling data coming in, it looks like this is Donald Trump's race to lose. And we're seeing every single day the party continuing to coalesce around Donald Trump, not Nikki Haley.
And, Eric, what about the 6 to 7% of the voters that were backing DeSantis? He pledged his support for Donald Trump. Will they go en masse to Trump, or might they split? Some of them vote for Haley.
Well, in New Hampshire, Ron DeSantis votes really won't have much of an impact because we know Ron DeSantis was polling at a very low number there. And also, it was a state that he actually did not compete in. Remember, after the Iowa caucuses, he went to South Carolina, not to New Hampshire. So it's unlikely it's going to have much of an impact, which is why if Donald Trump actually wins New Hampshire, it's going to be a much bigger win than expected because he will have actually done so without needing Ron DeSantis' support in this contest.
Just tell us, Eric, tell the British viewers, what is the format for tonight? How big are these events? What happens?
Well, New Hampshire is very different from Iowa. Iowa was a caucus state where you actually had to show up and you actually had to join with other supporters of your particular candidate. This is an instance where you're actually just going to the polls. So it's the first in nation actual primary where you're actually going into the polls and actually voting. It's highly unlikely that New Hampshire is going to have many of the issues Iowa did, where the weather was so bad. It was the coldest the weather had ever been during a primary in Iowa. So that's not likely to be a major factor in this contest.
What number should we be looking for to show that he's either faltering, Trump, or coasting it?
If Donald Trump is actually doing better than, say, 50% with conservatives, then I think it means it's going to be a very good night for Donald Trump. In the case of Nikki Haley, if she is actually doing better than, say, 20 points with independents, then that means it's going to be a better night for her. Both of them are playing very well to their respective strengths. Nikki Haley with independents, Donald Trump with more conservatives. The question is, can either of those candidates do better than what we're already seeing in terms of polling data with their strong suit?
Very interesting. And who do you think would be his running mate, Eric, if you had to place a bet now if Donald Trump gets the nomination?
Well, I think right now that's what everyone is watching. Here's where I think this stands right now. Tim Scott checks a lot of the boxes for Donald Trump's running mate. However, what we are seeing from Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik out of New York is that she is far better at actually throwing a punch than any of the other candidates that we know that are already auditioning. But this is Donald Trump we're talking about. He's going to make this a reality show project that is going to run for the next several months. So it's going to be a very interesting ride as he continues to card out these VP candidates.
OK, thank you so much, Eric. Eric Ham there, US political analyst.
You know, if it's a choice between Trump and Biden, I think you have to go for Trump.
Oh, every
by a million miles.
Single time.
Who would have thought it? Because Biden he's losing it.
He is losing it. We have got a great story coming up, a GBNews exclusive about fake stamps. And have you been a victim of sticking one in an envelope and not knowing that the person you've sent it to has got a fine? Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. This time yesterday, we were reeling from Storm Isha. Today, it's all about Storm Joslin, the next storm on the way, bringing spells of rain and then increasingly strong winds overnight tonight. First of all, it's a dry start in the east, doesn't last long. Rain sweeps across the country, heaviest over Western Hills, where there could be some issues for central and southwest Scotland, as well as northwest England, 40 to 60 millimetres of rain falling in some places. Not as much rain towards the southeast, but still dull and damp. It is mild, however, despite the wet and increasingly windy weather, 12 or 13, perhaps even 14 Celsius possible. But the winds really start to ramp up as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. Widely 55 to 65 miles an hour for the northern two-thirds of the country, particularly western coasts and hills. But for the north and west of Scotland, a swathe of 80-mile-per-hour gusts move through overnight. And now, this is more of a normal winter storm compared with Storm Isha, not as powerful, but coming so quickly after Isha could hamper recovery and repair efforts. That's why this one has been named. That's why there is an amber warning for the north and west of Scotland. It stays blustery into tomorrow morning. A bright start in the south, further showers to come for northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most frequent showers will be across the north and west of Scotland with a continued strong wind, but the winds will be coming down through the day. And with some brightness in the south, feeling a little more pleasant. Highs here of 11 to 12 Celsius, a bit cooler further north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We going jousting?
Not me and you. Well, we do often in the studio. Now, we're talking about the Royal Mail trying to get rid of Saturday deliveries. Outrageous. We're talking to a major trade union leader who's leading the fight to keep your Saturday post. Do you still post letters? I do.
Maybe just think, you know what, most of the things I send by email, so it doesn't matter. Stay with us. We're going to discuss it.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 23rd of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
UK airstrikes. The United States and the UK have carried out a second joint attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen overnight. Are we being dragged ever deeper into conflict? Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, says this.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action.
And a streamlined postal service. Royal Mail has said it would like to deliver post Monday to Friday only, but Rishi Sunak would not support the change, he says. When did you last send a letter that had to arrive on a Saturday?
And sticking with the post, a fake stamp scandal. An investigation by GB News has found books of stamps bought directly from the post office and some major supermarkets are counterfeit.
An Alzheimer's breakthrough, a new blood test that detects the disease up to 15 years before a patient shows symptoms, could be used to screen all over 50s in the future. Would you want to know if Alzheimer's was looming for you? Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com. We've got a load of emails coming in. Tell us about the weather where you are. Is it terrible, or is it just what we have here in the UK?
Could never be raining in the UK, could it, in January? That would be terrible.
First though, here's your news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. British strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen are designed to send a clear message. That's according to the Foreign Secretary. British aircraft used precision-guided bombs to strike several targets near an airfield in the capital, Sana'a. The UK and the US have been patrolling areas in the Red Sea after a spate of attacks on commercial ships by Iranian-backed militants. Lord Cameron says the UK is following its words with strong action.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taking.
Israel is proposing a 2-month ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for the release of all hostages. The US news outlet Axios reports the proposal, made via Qatari and Egyptian mediators, does not include an agreement to end the war. It comes after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak spoke to US President Joe Biden yesterday regarding civilian casualties in Gaza. Israel's defence forces announced that 24 of its soldiers were killed yesterday, its deadliest day since the start of the war with Hamas. Another storm is sweeping across Britain, bringing fresh disruption for commuters this morning, just a day after Storm Isha. The Met Office says Storm Joslin will bring strong winds, with amber and yellow alerts issued for much of the country. Yellow warnings for rain and ice are also in place across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. TransPennine Express is among several train companies warning of disruption. It's urging passengers to avoid travelling between England and Scotland from 3 o'clock this afternoon. Now, Royal Mail has been charging customers £5 to get their post after senders unknowingly bought fake stamps from some post offices. An investigation by GBNews found books of stamps bought directly from post offices and some local supermarkets were found to have been counterfeit. Those affected are now being forced to pay 4 times the cost of a standard first-class stamp. The post office says it received its stamps directly from Royal Mail. The government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda suffered another blow last night, with the House of Lords voting to delay the treaty. The chamber voted in favour of a push to pause the plan until ministers can prove Rwanda is a safe destination. The government's treaty with the Central African nation is a key part of its plan for asylum claims to be processed outside of Britain. The bill would compel judges to regard Rwanda as a safe country. 2 million people could have their gas and electricity cut off this winter because they can't afford their bills. That's according to Citizens Advice, which says around 800,000 people couldn't make a hot meal or have a shower in the past year. The charity is concerned over the affordability of essential services after Ofgem announced that power companies will be allowed to resume forcibly installing prepayment meters in some homes. Meanwhile, a report has found around 6 million people would need to be more than double their income to escape poverty. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation warns this is evidence of what he's calling social failure at scale. The charity says Britain has seen 6 changes of Prime Minister since the last time poverty levels fell across the country. A new weight loss pill designed to make people feel fuller is now available via the NHS. The treatment can be delivered in 15 minutes in the form of a capsule that contains gastric balloon filled with water. It requires no surgery, no endoscopy or anaesthesia. Allurion, which is the company behind the pill, says it's been in talks with the NHS about rolling out the treatment since it was approved in 2020. The film director Norman Jewison has died at the age of 97. In a career spanning 5 decades, his films were noted for tackling social and political issues. He directed In the Heat of the Night in 1967, starring Sidney Poitier, which dealt with themes of racism and policing and won the Academy Award for Best Picture. His next film, The Thomas Crown Affair, helped cement the iconic image of Steve McQueen. Other highlights include Moonstruck in 1987, for which Cher won the Oscar for Best Actress, and the 1999 boxing film The Hurricane, starring Denzel Washington. Those are your top stories on GB News this morning across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying Play GB News. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning to you. 10:06, thank you for joining us. You've been getting in touch at home. You share some of our despair about the weather. Gwen has said we only have a lot more storms now because we keep naming them. In the past, we just had a windy or very rare storm, but now that we humanise them, we personalise these storms, gives them this much more terrifying identity, doesn't it?
And Richard wasn't impressed by the danger to life alert. What nonsense, he says. Of course, everyone should be careful, but humans have survived the winter season up to now quite well. It's another lame excuse for people to stay at home, not go to work, and watch TV all day.
Yeah,
As long as they're watching GB News.
Brian says, why do we name the weather coming off the Atlantic? I live in Cornwall, where this is normal weather for January. Last week we had snow. It went on from 8 to 11 on Thursday. It's winter, and it will be for another 9 or 10 weeks yet.
Yeah.
And Peter says the same. We've always had storms in this country. After all, it is winter. I do not recall storms having names years ago. The great storm this country had in 1987 was the worst one. I believe I do remember that throughout the history of storms in England, but no one seems to ever talk about that.
All the trees in Seven Oaks were felled. Do you remember the
Yeah,
Seven Oaks?
I do. I remember it very well. And just on the post office, Malcolm has said, I've just received a first-class letter that was posted on Friday. The post office might as well not work, Royal Mail, sorry, might as well not work Saturdays. Joking aside, when are we going to put the service back into public hands? These companies forget that they were set up, what they were set up for and who they work for.
Yeah, of course, it was privatised in 2013 by the coalition.
Right, moving on. Keep your emails coming. The UK and the US have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen.
The Foreign Secretary, David Cameron's been touring the studios. He had this to say.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taking.
So joining us now is the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, always great to talk to you and get your insight in situations like this. Our inbox is echoing this idea, actually, questioning why are we getting involved in this? Germany, France, Italy, they haven't waded in with the Americans. Is it the right thing to do, in your opinion?
The French are a bit there, the Netherlands are there, the Australians are there, the Canadians are there. Why are they all there? Why is Britain involved? Well, it involves international merchant shipping, in which London has a very big stake. A lot of intelligence on this vital piece of traffic comes through London, the insurance markets, and we are genuinely defending a big money earner, a big national interest. It's not escalating, it's actually retaliating for attacks on ships, observing freedom of navigation, laws of the sea, underpinned by the UN Charter.
Is it working, Robert, because the Houthis are still attacking merchant shipping in that waterway?
I think you're really trying to do instant news here, that you bomb a place, they stop. No, it doesn't work like that. Look what's going on in Gaza. Look at another very troubled campaign. Not that the Houthi campaign is in trouble. They knew it would take time. What they're trying to do is to write down the stocks of quite sophisticated weaponry that the Houthis have got from Iran, trying to stop them coming in by sea. But it will take a bit of time. I hope not much more than a few weeks. But you can see what they're attacking. They're attacking launch sites, arsenals, magazines where they're being stored, and now radar and guidance stations. I fear that this won't be the last, but I think it's just one of a series. It won't go on forever. There aren't enough missiles to do all that anyway.
What's worrying a lot of people listening and watching there, Robert, is there a danger this could turn into a major military conflagration? We know who's paying the Houthis' bills, Iran, which has a vested interest in causing unrest, international unrest for the West.
Well, I agree with you. It's part of the general Iranian disruption campaign. And in fact, a very dangerous area, as we're seeing, is in North Iraq and in Syria, where there does seem to be, we do seem to be getting quite close to a confrontation between Iranian-backed forces and the US. There's been a lot of bombing there. By the way, there have been nearly 200 attacks on monitoring basis, keeping ISIS down, where there is a presence of international troops, largely American, but also there have been at least 30, 40 attacks on bases where there are British personnel. It's extremely complicated. The Houthis are doing it for their own motive, but they're in alliance with Iran. And it's a time not to let Iran off the hook, because I think that what the Iranians must love is this kind of discussion that's happening on your airwaves. Are we escalating? Are we doing... The problem with Iran is that there does seem to be something serious going on inside Iran, and they are displacing, if I can put it like that, by stirring up so much activity in 3 or 4 theatres, as you have rightly said. I mean, not just the Red Sea, but they're active there in the Gulf and in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, we do have an interest in that. We have an interest as an ally and a prime interest, because this is a prime bit of British commercial business that we do there. It's a complex problem, and I think it makes it very difficult for the news cycle. And that's something that's going on in Iran and Houthi. They do understand by simple method they can get dominance in the media space, and that's where they are succeeding.
Iran must have endless funds, though, Robert, if they want to keep the bombs coming via the Houthis. As you say, it's slightly by proxy on the West, Iran against the rest of the Western world. They must have infinite funds to keep this going.
They have a very large armaments industry, Bev, and I think that we haven't taken it seriously enough, because... Sorry, I haven't mentioned another theatre, because, of course, they've been supplying drones and now missiles to Russia for the Ukraine war. They're involved in that, and that is also where we're getting a toxic combination, because Russia is, though it's ramped up huge its defence industries, 40% devoted to defence now on these weapons, as I've been describing, from Iran and from North Korea. And North Korea has been making more belligerent noises towards Japan, but above all, South Korea, and threatening to have missiles that can drop a nuclear warhead on America. Happy days.
Robert, thank you. As always, I think thank you is the right word to use there. It does all seem pretty scary, doesn't it?
It does. But and although France and Denmark are there, they are not actually unleashing missiles in the way we are. We've got Lord Corby Ranger with us now, Conservative member of the House of Lords. Corby, what's the view amongst your parliamentary colleagues? Is there relief that we're backing this military action, or is there a sense, here we go again, being America's poodle, dragged along, we're punching perhaps above our weight, France aren't doing what we're doing, Germany never do, it seems.
Well, there is this Operation Prosperity Guardian that we're meant to be a coalition of international countries, as Rob was mentioning there. But this particular set of airstrikes appears to be reported to be outside of the remit of that particular operation. As has been said, I think, over the last 24 hours or so since the strikes, there needs to be a bit more explanation from the Prime Minister to Parliament about what's going on. We understand the sensitivities, obviously, about security and preempting this kind of conversation, but I think there is a need now for Parliament to be spoken to about what is going on and some of the justification, especially about this next set of strikes. Last time I spoke about this, I did say I didn't think there would be a one-off situation. Whenever you start this type of engagement, it does tend to go...
He did speak in the Commons after the first strike.
Did, yes.
Does he have to do it every time, do you think?
Well, the Secretary of State, Lord Cameron, will probably give us an update at some point as well, and I'll be looking forward to hearing what he says in the House of Lords. But I think we do, because the British public, as you quite rightly say, Andrew, will question our involvement, and we should question our involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, shall we talk about this Rwanda bill? So obviously the Lords voted by 214 votes to 171 last night to delay this treaty with Kigali. What does this mean? What just explain to us why the Lords are putting the brakes on this?
Yes, look, all of us, let's step back, feel slightly uncomfortable about what's going on here. But I think the question we have to ask is, as we always do, what are the alternatives? This is not a situation where we can't do anything. £8 million a day are our housing costs for asylum seekers. £8 billion a year is what it's costing this country overall. So there is a cost associated with this, but it's a human issue here as well. I have said in the Lords, in these debates previously, that the numbers I'm looking at are the numbers of people drowning in the English Channel. Children, women, men. Those are the numbers I want to see coming down, breaking the despicable human trafficking trade. And this policy is part of an overall group of activities that the government is trying to do to stop those boats, stop that misery. Now, that's my personal standing point of this. What the Lords is trying to do at the moment is look at the treaty that's been signed, that has been brought together to help understand the challenges that the Supreme Court put last time about whether Rwanda is a safe country for asylum seekers and for us to send them there. Suitable questions that the Supreme Court raised. The government, sovereign state, and Rwanda have worked together to answer those questions, and that's what this treaty is looking to provide confidence about. I understand people would still have further questions, but I think we need to be careful about, as a member of the House of Lords, about blocking the will of an elected government and what it's trying to achieve.
How much longer can this wretched thing be delayed? I mean, the flipping plane was supposed to take off 18 months ago or something, and an unelected, unaccountable judge, we don't even know what nationality he or she was, from the European Court, blocked it, and now we've got a bishop, the Bishop of Gloucester. I can't even understand why we've got bishops in the House of Lords anyway.
Yes,
she's leading the charge.
As a relatively new peer, I'm still learning about everyone's rules and roles there. But I would say that there were a number of people. Yes, the bishops, members of the Labour benches, cross-benching peers as well, and others, I would assume, probably even on the Conservative side, have concerns. Yes, let's debate it, but we do need to do something.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue that I have is, if not this, what? And we can keep obfuscating and trying to get to answers, but I sense from some of the debate that happened yesterday that it wasn't just about getting to the answer of is Rwanda safe. It's about blocking the policy, and I think that's the politics of it.
It's about wrecking one of Rishi's big five pledges.
Unfortunately, yes, and that's not what the Lords is about. And if anything I've learned over the last few months have been that, yes, let's scrutinise, yes, let's ask the questions, but we do have to allow our government to get on with what it needs to do.
Do you think ultimately, how long is this going to go on for, ping-ponging back and forth between the House of Commons and the Lords? Because the idea is that it won't even be at the earliest stages of being finished until Easter, March, April time.
Well, that's where the politics comes in. We know we have a Prime Minister who's committed to delivering this and needs to get it done. We also understand that there'll be an election some point this year.
Yeah.
So there are politics. You know, I did see a number of old Labour or new Labour figures floating around the House of Lords, more of them than in most days.
Peter Mandelson springs to mind.
He was. And so there was plenty of politics at play.
Yeah, they're all being wheeled out.
You know, there were also fellow peers saying that they're not trying to stop this policy, they just want answers. Well, OK, but we can accelerate that. We can improve the process and make sure that we do it in a timely manner to support what really needs to get done. And that is to stop this vile trade and provide the disincentive that people get to bring people illegally into this country.
Can I ask you on one other issue? It's the New Hampshire primary tonight. Donald Trump coasting ahead. Now, you work for Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson said just the other day, he may have seen his Mail column, I can't remember, that he thinks the world will be a safer place with President Trump. What do you think?
I don't always disagree or agree with my former boss.
You're not about to sit on the fence here, are you, Lord Ranger?
If we look at the world at the moment, it isn't exactly a safe place. We are seeing conflict and terror in many different parts of the world. Sometimes you need strong politicians, a strong man. We have, obviously, the strong man of Russia, President Putin there. Maybe the West needs strong political figures. Is Donald Trump that person? I don't know.
Biden isn't that person.
Yes, he's not. I think the American people have a difficult choice. You know, we sometimes think we have a difficult choice in our political conversations here. I think the US have a difficult choice. Look,
if you had to choose between one or t'other and you were voting, who would you vote for?
Oh, I need to probably see more about what they're going to say when he gets the candidacy. So I am going to sit on the fence here. Look, Trump's policies have helped the American economy restabilise. And the American people are seeing that. They haven't seen that fully come through, even though they've had the IRA policies around the Inflation Reduction Act and everything else that Biden's brought in. But it's about international politics, and Trump didn't really see an interest for the US in international politics. Would that be better for the international world as we see it? Do we need a more outward-looking US Prime Minister if we've got so many things on the international scene that we need people like America to take part? Would they have done these strikes right now in Yemen if Trump was president? I'm on the side of the strikes at the moment, so Trump may not have supported them.
In a word, give me one adjective to describe the relationship that might exist between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump were they both to win this year's elections.
Awkward.
Very good word.
Great answer. Lord Culver Ranger, thank you so much. Great to see you. Right, still to come this morning, domestic energy prices are predicted to fall by 16% in April. Woo, good news. Is it too little too late for the 2 million people expecting their gas and electricity to be cut off because they can't afford their prepayment meter? If you are one of those people, we have some advice on how to handle that situation in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, while fuel bills are going to come down by 16% in April, more than 2 million people will have had their gas and electricity cut off this winter because they can't afford to top up their prepayment meter.
So, as Andrew says, these energy bills are predicted to fall, for most people, by more than £300 a year starting in the spring after a drop in wholesale gas prices.
So what do you do if you can't pay in your prepayment meter? Well, Energy Policy Manager of Citizens Advice, Anna Pardo, joins us now. Anna, this is a lot of people affected by this. Some figures suggest 2 million. What is the simple advice you're giving people?
As you said, at Citizens Advice, our frontline advisors are helping more people than ever that are unable to afford to pay their energy bill. Households will have already received a lot of the support that they're entitled to this winter through things like the warm home discount. There will be more support for those who are eligible for cost of living payments. There's one more payment that's due in February. But sort of at Citizens Advice, what we've seen is that these support payments kind of help people in the short term, but aren't enough to deal with the huge problems that we're seeing with energy affordability since prices have risen. If you are worried about your energy bill, the best thing to do is to contact your energy supplier, because they have to work with you to find an affordable payment solution, and they may be able to refer you on to additional support as well. If you're still worried or you want independent advice, you can always come to Citizens Advice, where our advisors can help talk you through your situation.
Anna, just remind us, who are the people who, I was going to say qualify for prepayment meters, but actually pretty much have them forced upon them, don't they?
Well, following the terrible bad practice that we saw last year, there's actually been a ban on force-fitting prepayment meters over the last year. That is starting to, we've got 3 suppliers who do now have permission to restart. Ofgem has put strong new rules in place which stop some people being forced onto prepayment meters. So that's people over at the age of 75, if there's like a household with a child under the age of 2. And some people with certain health conditions as well. The new rules do also mean, though, that prepayment meters should only be fitted when it's safe to do so, and as an absolute last resort.
So just remind us of that scandal, because this was forced entry into houses, wasn't it, for people who didn't necessarily meet a direct debit or they had outstanding costs for their energy bills. The energy companies were allowed to gain entry and to forcibly put one of these meters in, which meant you wouldn't get any heat or power until you paid up front, basically.
Yeah, last winter, Citizens Advice was one of the organisations who helped to expose the terrible bad practice that was going on, where energy suppliers were breaching the rules that were already in place by forcing people onto prepayment meters who really shouldn't be on them because it wasn't safe, and they weren't able to keep those meters topped up and were sat in the cold and the dark. And as a result, we helped to expose that terrible bad practice, and Ofgem did ban for force-fitting of prepayment meters. But what it's worth saying is, even if we never fitted another prepayment meter, we've still got 4 million households who are already on them, and those people are struggling to top up. So Citizens Advice today is calling on the government to introduce additional support for those who are struggling the most to make sure they can stay warm and healthy.
Just one more question, Anna. We've had times in the past where people have struggled to make ends meet. What are you hearing now that's making life so difficult for people at the moment to meet their bills?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, Frontline Citizens Advice are helping more people than ever to afford their energy bills, and our research has found that 5 million people live in households where there's energy debt at the moment. I think what we've seen is we saw that huge spike in energy bills about 18 months ago now. Those bills have come down a bit, but they're still so much higher than they were. And at the same time, we've also seen people's other costs grow, like we've seen mortgage interest rise, we've seen the cost of food rise enormously as well. And people have run out of things to cut. What we're seeing is like huge number of people whose essential outgoings are bigger than their income, and people just, there's nothing left for people to cut. The books don't balance, and we really, energy is an essential service, and we can't carry on with this number of people unable to afford it, which is why we want the government to step in with that additional support.
All right, thank you, Anna. Energy Policy Manager, Citizens Advice, Anna Pardo there.
Good constructive advice, isn't it? I mean, thank God now they don't cut people off.
Right, we're going to do some reading while you listen to the news.
Children's Sex Guide, as young as how old? 7 or 8 can get this book. Teaches them how to engage in oral sex.
There's all sorts of words we're going to be
for that, aren't they?
skirting around in the next item. You might want to stay here, and we will let you know what your kids or your grandchildren might be seeing at school. All of this and more after your morning's news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. 10:32, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. British strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen are designed to send a clear message, that's according to the Foreign Secretary. British aircraft used precision-guided bombs to strike several targets near an airfield in the capital, Sana'a. The UK and the US have been patrolling areas in the Red Sea after a spate of attacks on commercial ships by Iranian-backed militants. Lord Cameron says the UK is following its words with strong action.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taking.
Israel is proposing a 2-month ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for the release of all hostages. The US news outlet Axios reports the proposal, made via Qatari and Egyptian mediators, does not include an agreement to end the war. It comes after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak spoke to US President Joe Biden yesterday regarding civilian casualties in Gaza. And another storm is sweeping across Britain, bringing fresh disruption for commuters just a day after Storm Isha. The Met Office says Storm Joslin will bring strong winds, with amber and yellow alerts issued for much of the country. Yellow warnings for rain and ice are also in place across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. TransPennine Express is among several train operators warning of disruption. It's urging passengers to avoid travelling between England and Scotland from 3 o'clock this afternoon. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2720 and 1.1689 euros. The price of gold is £1,594 and 7 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,473 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
I'm reading this book. We're going to be talking about it in just a moment. It's a sex book for kids.
It's a pretty big book. How many pages is that?
I mean, look, I'm no Mary Whitehouse. It's 300 and odd pages.
300 pages for an 8-year-old?
I'm quite difficult to shock. And I'm really, really shocked.
It's completely over the top.
Getting a bit of a sweat on reading this. Right, you want to know what's in it?
We're going to tell you.
Yeah, we're going to tell you in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
10:38. Bev's still got her nose in this sex book, but we are going to talk about the fact Downing Street is saying that the government will oppose Royal Mail plans to scrap Saturday letter deliveries. Ofcom is looking at the possibility of cuts to the postal service.
So joining us now is General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, Dave Ward. Good morning to you, Dave. Right, where are we at with the post office? You know, people still hold in the Royal Mail, people hold a place in their hearts for these two institutions, but it feels like they're both getting quite a public kicking at the moment.
Well, first of all, the two institutions, unfortunately, were split many years back when the government decided to privatise Royal Mail. And neither of the two institutions can really work effectively separately. So, you know, we'd love to see Royal Mail and the Post Office come back together again. I don't think the sort of things that have happened with the Horizon scandal would have probably happened if the two were closer together. But crucially, they both need each other to build a successful future. So look, the key debate at the moment is obviously where Ofcom's report, which was unfortunately leaked over the weekend in a very unprofessional way. I think the government's response seems to have almost killed the report now. But what we're looking for is a company that wants to engage with its workforce on how it grows the business in the future. And there are so many assets to Royal Mail. The debate always goes to, well, you know, let's see how we can, you know, we're losing money. Well, that's because they've never had a proper growth strategy. And I've got to say, Ofcom have contributed massively to the decline in profits of Royal Mail. They've allowed profitable bulk mail to be hived off by competitors. Now, not a lot of your viewers know this, but actually, Royal Mail last year, the revenue from letters, packets, and the parcels that go through the USO was £3.7 billion. So there is a platform there. What we've got to do is come up with ideas with the company to see whether or not we can expand the role of postal workers, whether we can offer services that are much more tailored to the local needs of businesses so that we can start to see ways of using Royal Mail to grow local economies, and whether Royal Mail's social value, which is immense, which happens on a daily basis, whether we can utilise that in a way that actually supports local communities in a much better way. We believe that's possible. That should be the starting point of the debate, not where Ofcom are coming from.
Dave, you and I often disagree, but I'm with you 100% here. And do you not suspect, actually, that Royal Mail wants to kill letter delivery? That's why they keep putting up the price. What is it, £1.25 for a standard-sized letter, £1.95 for a larger letter? So many people I know this year said, we simply can't afford to send a Christmas card this year because it's too expensive.
I think, Andrew, the honest truth is that there's been a succession of people who have led the business who have not got a clue about how you grow a business. So if you look at the assets of Royal Mail, which is a presence in every community, which is postal workers who are trusted more than any other delivery workers, no one ever sits down and engages with the union, engages with workers directly on how we can grow the business. What they always start from the point of is, as you said, is a cycle of decline. And we can't underestimate here the impacts of privatisation on that and the impacts of Ofcom's own policies. If you look back, Ofcom have actually taken money away from Royal Mail by giving it to the competitors in the bulk mail market, which is still very profitable in the UK. They've allowed those competitors to utilise Royal Mail's networks, almost halving, and in some cases taking away, huge amounts of annual profit. And then they come along and say, oh, and by the way, we've got to cut the service even more. So I think you're right. There's been a strategy for years here, which is about running the company into the ground. And it's a real shame that is where this debate is starting again.
But you touched on the importance of how it's a really important community service, Dave, isn't it, the Royal Mail? And a lot of older people, they want a delivery every day. They want to be able to post their letters. They want to be able to post their cards to their friends and send letters. And if the Royal Mail are allowed, if this is allowed to wither on the vine on a Saturday, the next thing you know, it'll be a 3-day service.
Well, our key concern, to be perfectly honest with you, was that we think that the report was a sham. We think there are people on the Royal Mail board. There was certainly the previous CEO and the management team. Most of them have gone now. They were certainly of a view that they wanted to get to a 3-day service. We think Ofcom were really driving at that aim. And that's a major concern because that would destroy Royal Mail.
Dave, let me tell you what Royal Mail have said. They said it is simply not sustainable to maintain a delivery network built for 20 billion letters when we are now only delivering 7 billion. They said we've been consistent in saying the need for reform is urgent to ensure a modern and sustainable universal service. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's some truth in the fact that if you want to sustain a service that's important to the public, you have to create the products and the services that go through it that are relevant to people going forward. We have no issue with that. Our concern is that the very people who are saying that to you never come forward with plans to grow the top line.
Presumably,
it's always waiting for politicians or Ofcom to come up with ways of cutting back all the time.
Presumably the shareholders, Dave, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to read another step. Presumably the shareholders are also taking a massive cut to their pay, of course, for a business like this. It's not just the postal workers themselves.
Well, look, the shareholders benefited at a time when Royal Mail needed to invest in the company, invest in the workforce, when the company, previous CEO, Andrew knows this debate very well, the previous CEO gave away over £700 million to the shareholders and left the workforce having to battle out for a pay rise. So they've made some terrible decisions along the way. There are some encouraging signs. I'm going to be honest with the new CEO of Royal Mail, who's cleared out a lot of the old management team and brought in some new people. But genuinely, we need to have a debate across the UK about how we can utilise the assets of Royal Mail. I was listening to a debate this morning from the greeting card companies who was saying that their business is actually growing. Now, surely there's a way of connecting with those companies to give much tailored service. We've put ideas forward in the past on how you expand the role of postal workers. Actually, the agreement that we reached with Royal Mail on, the need for changing, modernising the network, also committed Royal Mail to maintaining the universal service, and also said that we would develop these plans to expand the role of postal workers.
We've just got to read you very briefly what Ofcom say, Dave. Ofcom says while it will publish options for how the postal service might need to change, it will be for the government and Parliament to determine whether any changes are needed to minimum requirements of the universal service. Now, the Prime Minister says there will be no change on his watch. Do you believe him?
I believe that the Prime Minister acted in a political way yesterday. I think he's less supportive of the postal service and more worried about his own personal postal bag, what comes in, and the criticism that some of the MPs, particularly in the Shires, might get if this change were to happen. So I think it was a purely political move in advance of, what we know is going to be a general election this year. So I don't think we got that debate to be taking place. What we want is a legitimate conversation across the UK, and we're going to come up with our own report. We're going to work with economists, we're going to work with industry experts, and we're going to come up with a vision for the future of Royal Mail that everybody can get behind.
Great.
All right, that's Dave Ward, he's head of the Communication Workers Union. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it.
Nigel Nelson and Tonya Buxton with us. Nigel, you know a lot of the trade union leaders. I think if more trade union leaders were like Dave Ward, even I'd be supporting them a lot more.
Oh, good.
What's happened to you?
I've always thought Dave Ward talks a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he does, but an awful lot of trade union leaders do. Not all of them, I appreciate, but
Mick
a lot
Lynch
of
doesn't.
Well, you see, I think Mick Lynch is really good. Mick Lynch, well, he succeeded.
The agreement between us is never going to last. I didn't might last longer than 15 seconds.
But what Mick Lynch got was a deal for his members, and that's what union chiefs are there for, to get the best deal they possibly can, working conditions and pay for the people they represent. I mean, they're not there to actually be fair or whatever. It is to
Have you heard what you just said? They're not there to be fair. You've just said that out loud. They're not there to be fair. So it's like a mob. They're like mob leaders trying to get the best deals, irrelevant of the public.
Hang on. I stand by that.
Let's get that in the next Tory manifesto. Trade unions are not there to be fair.
They're not there to be fair any more than a lawyer is. If a lawyer is defending somebody in court, they're not there to be. If he's defending, he's not there to be fair to the prosecution.
There's something in the Hippocratic Oath about being fair as a lawyer.
Well, the lawyer must be telling the truth, but it doesn't mean they're going to be fair to the prosecution, does it?
Right.
So the same thing applies to the unions. They're taking a side, they're representing their membership, they're the key people, and if bosses behave better, you wouldn't need unions to do what they do.
Has a 6-day Royal Mail service had its day, Tonya?
You know, I think, so, and I'm loath to say it, that I don't know whether it's still as relevant to have them coming on a Saturday anymore. And if they can streamline...
Your birthday card, if you've got your birthday on a Saturday.
You know, I just...
7-year-old and there's no delivery.
I mean...
You want to hear the thud of the letters on the mat.
The reality is they very rarely arrive on time, at the best of times. So,
you need to send it a week in advance anyway,
exactly. You need to send it a week in advance anyway, and it's down to the parents to hide it and pretend it's arrived on the day. So I don't think having them on a Saturday is relevant. If they can streamline the service and give us a better service and not have the Saturday, then maybe
because they're up against now, we do so much shopping online, and Amazon will come 7 days a week until midnight, 10 o'clock at night, you get a knock on the door, and there's your parcel. DPD, Hermes, and there's there's all of these different delivery services, which the market is flooded with delivery, but as I said about having a place in our heart, it does feel like it's something that we lose at our peril.
But it's more than that. What they're providing is a public service.
Absolutely right.
And as a result of that, you can't start taking the profitability motive into account every single time.
But they've already done that with the post office, Nigel. You know that feeling that when you go to the post office, there's someone part of the community there.
And that's national. That's still quite state-owned.
Gone now, hasn't it?
We were going to talk about the kids' sex book, but I don't want to squash it into this couple of minutes we've got.
Later.
Can we just briefly talk then about the Rochdale grooming gang leader still living in this country, Tonya? How is this possible? How many years?
So this is where we're talking about those lawyers that you're talking about, the lying, cheating, thieving, disgusting, immoral lawyers. This is where they come in. how they can... So this Kwari Abdul Raf, he went to prison. He was supposed to go for 6 years. He only went for 2.5 years. He's come out. Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, said, right, get him out, deport him immediately. They appealed. Their appeal was rejected, and he's still in the country, still living. These poor people, the victims, these kids that they raped for 2 years, gang raped them, have to live side by side by these disgusting animals who we are paying for, and their appeals are paid for by my taxes that I work hard for. I am sick of this.
I know.
I'm sick of this. I've had enough.
I'm going to reach peak exasperation today.
Just can't take
Tanya's
it.
right, isn't she, Nigel? He's here because of his human rights.
No, he's here because Pakistan won't take him back. So we've stripped him of his British citizenship. He was dual national, stripped of his British citizenship, left with Pakistani citizenship.
Put him on Ascension Island. In the middle of the Atlantic.
I'm sure they don't want him either.
There's very few people there. They wouldn't even notice him.
At the moment, the point is that he should be going back to Pakistan. We should be able to deport foreign criminals who are living here back to their home country. If Pakistan, and this is only reported, that Pakistan won't accept him, if they
That's
won't,
not the case,
we're a
but
bit stuck.
they have rejected. The thing is they're clever, because what he's done is he's rejected his Pakistani nationality.
Right.
Pakistan will take him back. It's all logistics and it's human rights lawyers interfering with justice for these poor girls that have been raped by these disgusting mainly Pakistani Muslim men who have done this to our young white girls. We have to stop
Tonya,
this.
remember only last week Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, talking about the failure of the police, the failure of social services with the grooming gangs in the bursaries. And here we've got yet another failure. As he pointed out, some of them are still here, and here's one of them. One of the leaders of the gang.
And one of the leaders, and also don't forget that Adil Khan, whose appeal again was rejected, and he's still here as well. He got a 13-year-old girl pregnant, and he's still here.
The law is a joke.
The law is a sham. I'm sick of it.
And I don't want to have this conversation without mentioning the amazing Maggie Oliver, former police officer, who has been fighting this
she's
for 10
remarkable.
to 15
She's a remarkable woman.
She absolutely should be Dame Maggie. Absolutely. Why are we not giving...
in addition to the law.
She will be, I'm sure. We've got to make that happen. Right, don't go anywhere, because we're going to be talking about the fact that hairdressers are risking closure because of an enormous tax burden. Apparently, I think you're doing your bit to help them out. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. The weather stays stormy, with Joslin the next on the list, arriving through the rest of the day, bringing spells of rain and then increasing winds overnight and into Wednesday morning. This is Storm Joslin, a very large area of low pressure with tightly packed isobars. The strongest of the winds later on will be across the north and the west of the UK. The heaviest of the rain will be through the early part of the afternoon. Some very wet weather across western hills of Scotland, northwest England and Wales. Rain warnings in force, 50 millimetres in some spots that could cause some issues. Not a huge amount of rain further south, but there will be a lot of cloud and an increasing wind, so that's not going to make it feel very pleasant, even if temperatures are above average for the time of year. The main bands of rain move through overnight, followed by showers, and it's at this point that the wind really picks up into the early hours of Wednesday. 80-mile-per-hour gusts threatening north and west Scotland, 55 to 65 elsewhere. A notch down on Storm Isha, but could cause impacts given the repair and recovery work that's ongoing from Storm Isha. Stays blustery into Wednesday morning, further showers or longer spells of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Eventually the showers becoming fewer, and there will be some sunshine further south for a time before some wetter weather arrives by the end of the day into Wales and the southwest, staying mild if rather windy.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Still to come, Britons are furious and fear they look like criminals as they're charged for fake stamps despite buying them often from post offices. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 23rd of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So UK airstrikes alongside the United States. The UK has carried out a second joint attack on Houthi rebels in Yemen overnight. Are we being dragged into a deeper conflict? Our Home Security editor Mark White has more.
Well, the US and the UK may have intended for these strikes on the Houthi rebels to be limited, but the Houthis have continued their attacks on shipping in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea.
And fake stamp scandal. An investigation by GB News has found books of stamps bought directly from the post office and some reputable supermarkets have been deemed false.
And for the chop, half of Britain's hairdressers face closure as taxes cripple the high street businesses. What can we do to save them?
An Alzheimer's breakthrough, a new blood test which detects the disease up to 15 years before a patient shows symptoms, could be used to screen all over 50s in the future. We're asking you this: Would you want to know if Alzheimer's was looming for you?
And is it age appropriate? Children's sex guide, Welcome to Sex, was slammed as ridiculous, I agree, after describing men as penis owners and women as vagina owners.
I think it's almost dangerous.
I mean, I'm laughing, but honestly, I am not easily shocked, and I've been reading this book and I am
about 10-year-olds about having online sex? No, we don't want teenagers. We want 10-year-olds having online sex. We don't want 10-year-olds having sex at all, frankly.
It's very strange, very cartoon images, and it's supposed to be appealing to teens, but I can tell you, my teenagers wouldn't look at those cartoon images and think that's a book for them. It looks like it's aimed at a much younger market, but we will tell you a little bit more about what's in it. You will be shocked, I promise you. You might spit out your bacon butter in your coffee this morning. GBviews@gbnews.com is the email address, but first of all, here is the latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. 2 minutes past 11. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. British strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen are designed to send a clear message. That's according to the Foreign Secretary. British aircraft used precision-guided bombs to strike several targets near an airfield in the capital, Sana'a. The UK and the US have been patrolling areas in the Red Sea after a spate of attacks on commercial ships by Iranian-backed militants. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, said it was deeply disappointing that the strikes were launched without a debate in Parliament. But Lord Cameron says the UK is following its words with strong action.
What the Houthis are doing is unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's threatening the freedom of navigation. That's why we've taken the action. Alongside that action is a whole set of measures we'll be taking, including sanctions and other pressure to put on the Houthis, combined, of course, with the action the Royal Navy is taking with others in the Red Sea. And we'll be building the strongest coalition of support to back the steps that we've been taking.
Israel's proposing a 2-month ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for all hostages being released. The US news outlet Axios reports that the proposal, made via Qatari and Egyptian mediators, does not include an agreement to end the war. Israel's defence forces announced that 24 of its soldiers were killed yesterday, its deadliest day since the start of the war with Hamas. Another storm is sweeping across Britain, bringing fresh disruption for commuters just a day after Storm Isha. The Met Office says Storm Joslin will bring strong winds with amber and yellow alerts issued for much of the country. Yellow warnings for rain and ice are also in place across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. TransPennine Express is among several train operators warning of disruption. It's urging passengers to avoid travelling between England and Scotland from 3 o'clock this afternoon. Royal Mail has been charging customers £5 to get their post after senders unknowingly bought fake stamps from some post offices. An investigation by GB News found books of stamps bought directly from post offices and some local supermarkets were found to have been counterfeit. Those affected are now being forced to pay 4 times the cost of a standard first-class stamp. The post office says it receives stamps directly from Royal Mail. A spokesperson for Royal Mail told GB News it has a robust process for verifying stamps, and anyone who thinks they've been incorrectly charged should contact them. Lord Cameron is urging his fellow peers to get behind the government's push to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. They voted last night in favour of pausing the plan until ministers can prove it's a safe destination. Britain's treaty with the Central African nations is a key part of its plan for asylum claims to be processed outside of Britain. The bill would compel judges to regard Rwanda as a safe country. 2 million people could have their gas and electricity cut off this winter because they cannot afford their bills. Citizens Advice says it's concerned over the affordability of essential services. That's after Ofgem announced power companies will be allowed to resume forcibly installing prepayment meters in some homes. Meanwhile, a report has found around 6 million people would need to more than double their income to escape poverty. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation says it's evidence of what it calls social failure at scale. The charity says Britain has seen 6 changes of prime ministers since the last time poverty levels fell across the country. A new weight loss pill designed to make people feel fuller is now available via the NHS. The treatment can be delivered in 15 minutes in the form of a capsule that contains a gastric balloon that's then filled with water. It requires no surgery, no endoscopy or anaesthesia. Allurion, which is the company behind the pill, says it's been in talks with the NHS about rolling out the treatment since it was approved in 2020. The film director Norman Jewison has died at the age of 97. In a career spanning 5 decades, his films were noted for tackling social and political issues. He directed In the Heat of the Night in 1967, starring Sidney Poitier, which dealt with themes of racism and policing, and won the Academy Award for Best Picture. His next film, The Thomas Crown Affair, helped cement the iconic image of Steve McQueen. Other highlights include Moonstruck in 1987, for which Cher won the Oscar for Best Actress, and the 1999 boxing film The Hurricane, starring Denzel Washington. It's quite a career. Those are your top stories on GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying Play GB News. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Thank you for joining us this morning. It is 11:07. We're having a look at what you've been saying at home about the Post Office story and the fact that it's not Post Office, it's Royal Mail. We need to draw the distinction.
They were split up.
Yeah. And Craig has said Dave Ward should hang his head in shame. The CWU, the Communication Workers Union, have absolutely no power now due to this man. He should have been sacked long ago. The union is finished due to him. You like him. You think highly of him, don't you?
Why, David, you have to tell us why you think that.
Bit harsh, that, Craig.
About the CWU.
Matt says, I find this strange. In my area, we're lucky if we get 2 deliveries a week. It's frustrating, as it doesn't matter if I have a delivery where time delivery has been paid for. They simply save it up for when they can be bothered. And at the time of the other post office scandal, it's not good to feel swindled twice. Once buying stamps that are now useless and secondly paying a fine for them with selling counterfeit stamps. We're going to come on to that story in a minute. You'll be amazed. And the House of Lords has obviously got a bit of a kicking from you guys.
I love what this one is. Sharon says, time for them to go. They're out of touch. They're not elected. They go against the democracy of the British public. Totally disgusting. Somebody here called them lunatics. Unelected bunch of dithering lunatics.
This is because, of course, as we knew was going to happen, the Rwanda Safety Bill Treaty, I think they're calling it now, is going to go back and forth from the House of Lords to the House of Commons.
They call it ping-pong, which is a genteel way of saying they're going to delay it at every opportunity. There's going to be a Labour government coming soon. It used to be in Labour's manifesto they would abolish it.
Well, Mick has said, can you please ask the Arsenal Football Club why they advertise Visit Rwanda on their shirts?
They do.
And advertising boards around the ground if it's not safe.
It's very true.
Very good point, Mick.
Yeah, made that point in my column. Yeah.
Right. Now, the UK and the US have carried out their second joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen.
Here he is, our Home Security Editor, Mark White, who knows everything. Mark, there'll be, I'm going to go to Westminster later. There'll be a bit of angst that the Prime Minister hasn't spoken about this yet. We've heard from the Foreign Secretary. He brought back a very experienced figure in David Cameron to take all this burden off of him. Do we need to hear from the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think so. I would be surprised if we don't get some kind of statement today, because whatever they say about limited strikes, this is an escalation. We took part on the 11th of January in those initial strikes. Yeah. Many people thought, because we heard very specifically from the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary and Foreign Secretary, that these were limited and proportionate strikes, that would be it. OK, the US have taken part in some very low-level strikes on 1 or 2 targets in the past week, but the UK was not involved. But for the UK to be back in this, flying typhoons from Cyprus to take part, you would expect that there should be some kind of statements. And
Robert Fox, we talked to him earlier from the Evening Standard, a very distinguished and very experienced defence editor. He says it isn't just Britain, the United States, France are there, Denmark. He's not right in the sense that they've got ships out there, but they are not using missiles against the Houthi rebels in the way Britain and America are.
Yeah, there's 2 tiers here. There is the operation that struck against the Houthi rebels, targeted them directly. That was, in military terms, the strikes were carried out by the US and the UK, and they were assisted to a very small degree by a few other nations, including Bahrain and Canada. Then you have the other operation, which is all about protecting shipping going through the Red Sea in the Gulf of Aden, and that involves ships from a number of countries. But they're not involved in directly targeting the Houthis. They're all about trying to protect the shipping from whatever the Houthis are lobbing over.
But that's why there is the pressure, I think, on the Prime Minister to explain why it is us again who, I'm not going to say, I mean, I think I probably support what we're doing, but I would prefer it if there was an international alliance doing this, and it's not just us again, because there's no such thing as a free lunch. The terrorists will come after us.
And where, OK, it might be difficult at this moment to talk about an end game, but where does this go if the Houthis decide that they are going to continue to fire missiles and whatever they have available to them at shipping? And remember, this is a well-armed, belligerent rebel group that fought off the Saudis for a number of years that ended effectively in the Saudis having to just realise that they are not going to be able to bomb this group into submission. If we are in a protracted conflict with the Houthi rebels, where does it go? What's the end game here? Do we keep striking at them for months and years ahead?
Do we know
that all has a cost?
Do we know how many Houthi rebels have been killed? Do we have any number on body counts that's happening out there? Is there a human cost at the moment as well?
Well, what the US and the UK have said is that they've been very careful to strike at night when these facilities are not manned by many people.
Very nice of them.
And they've also been going after targets and choosing targets to ensure that there is a minimum of civilian casualties. There was half a dozen deaths, I think, on January the 11th, and they were all apparently linked to the Houthi rebel organisation, so no civilians. So from that point of view, however it's presented and packaged up by the Houthis, there doesn't appear to have been civilian casualties. We don't know about this time round.
And they're also targeting underground launch pads. How do we know they hit them? May sound a silly question, but
you know, that's intelligence gathering. They will have potentially assets in and around that region. There's satellite imagery. There's all kinds of things that they can call intercepting communications to get an idea of what they have degraded. There was intelligence sources suggesting that they may have degraded 30% of the Houthi rebels' missile stocks. But of course, they've not just got missiles, they've got drones.
Get some more from Iran.
Well, it might be difficult to get them in country, but they'll certainly try.
Of course, where this goes next is it becomes an economic war, doesn't it, Mark? We were talking about this a little earlier about who is going to profit from this. Obviously, people who build bombs. It's an excellent time to be in part of the military-industrial complex right now. But also people who have run shipping companies, because they are going to be just explain to our audience that basically some people are going to profit from this, but other people, including the British public, actually, are going to take a hit.
There's no doubt that it will hit the public in the pocket here because you've got quite a number of ships now having to stay out of the line of fire and rerouting around Africa, and that's adding 10,000 miles to that voyage to the UK if that's where they're headed. That puts the price up, of course, but there's also the insurance. It's absolutely rocketed trying to get insurance on these ships that are transiting through that area. All that eventually will impact the consumer here in the UK. But add to that the fact that we are spending billions of pounds every year in supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia. And if we are involved in any kind of extended conflict with the Houthi rebels, that will have to be factored in as well at a time when the UK armed forces are really, really struggling with recruitment, with funding, you know, scrapping frigates, and we're hearing that some of the landing ships that would be operated by the Royal Marines may be laid up as well. So real concerns that here in the UK we're struggling with the ability to, you know, fund properly and sustain our own military without getting involved in yet potentially another costly campaign.
Who would want to be an incoming Prime Minister, eh?
And talking to the Prime Minister, just getting some breaking news. The Prime Minister is going to make a statement to the Commons at 12:30.
Thought it would be unlikely that he would.
noise behind in the usual channels, they call it.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank you, Mark. Lovely to see you. OK, right. An investigation by GB News has revealed that books of stamps bought from the post office and some local supermarkets have been deemed counterfeit.
This means innocent people who bought these stamps in good faith have been charged £5 by the Royal Mail to get their post after senders unknowingly used these fake stamps, 4 times the cost. The standard first-class stamp, which you may know is now an outrageous £1.25.
Well, a spokesperson from the Post Office has said Post Office Limited receives its stamps directly from Royal Mail's secure printers. Customers who buy stamps at post offices are given an itemised receipt, and this will be required to investigate any allegations of fake stamps.
Well, joining us in the studio is GBNews.com digital finance editor Jessica Sheldon, who's brokered this story. Astonishing statement from Royal Mail. Not a hint of regret or contrition. I'm terribly sorry we put people to this this difficulty and put some people out of pocket.
How did you come across it, Jessica, in the first place?
Yes, good morning. We came across this through GB News viewers and readers. Lots of people were getting in touch with us via our email address for the Money team. That's money@gbnews.uk. And we saw quite a few people telling similar stories, so we decided to investigate.
So they were telling you, we bought these stamps, we sent them off, and then whoever got the letter or the Christmas card, birthday card, got a bill.
Yep, they were telling us that they bought them at reputable places, such as the post office or small supermarkets. And it is really difficult to tell the difference when you look at the 2 stamps compared, a counterfeit one with a genuine one.
So let's see, we should hold them both up and say which is counterfeit. Oh, they're on the screen. So which is counterfeit, which is genuine? You'd never be able to tell the difference.
No, I think it's only when you know that some have come back counterfeit that you can start to see the colour is slightly different. If you run your finger over the QR code, it's got a texture rather than flat.
So the QR code that's genuine has a texture. Right, as opposed to the other one. And, of course, the QR code is quite recent.
This is a new thing, isn't it?
When I first bought stamps with the QR code, I dutifully cut them off.
So did I.
Because I thought, I didn't know quite what they were for, so I cut them off. And then, of course, people then got a bill because those stamps weren't legal. What's happened here? Is it a genuine printing error by Royal Mail?
Well, we contacted Royal Mail, who said that it's very important that they investigate. They have given us a statement. They said that we have a robust multi-stage process in place when assessing whether barcoded stamps are genuine. This includes a thorough examination using specialist equipment, then a follow-up inspection by a human before any stamp is marked as counterfeit or pre-used. Unfortunately, without seeing all of the envelopes used, it would be impossible to explain what happened in these cases, but we will always happily review individual cases, and if an error has been made, then we will, of course, correct.
And still no contrition, still no word sorry.
I can barely feel the difference in these stamps, having the real ones here in my hand and the counterfeit ones. So the basically what you're looking for at home is you get this little barcode bit now with stamps.
And don't do what I did, cut it off.
Where are you? Over here. So you get these little barcodes now, and you have to put both sections on an envelope, don't you, Jessica? And you can, if you run your finger on the barcode, it's a little bit rough. On the counterfeit ones, it's very, very smooth, but barely. I mean, you can't really see the difference.
Do we know how many of these fake stamps were inadvertently produced? How many are in circulation?
We don't know. We have spoken to a range of people all across the country who have reported problems with this.
So it's not just isolated to one part of the country?
No, we've heard from across the board, Birmingham, Sussex, Blackpool, all over the country. And for different reasons, people are being affected. We've had people send Christmas cards and birthday cards, and their loved ones are having to pay £5 for their message.
Money back.
But we've also spoken to small business owners who are very concerned about their reputation because they've been sending out orders using these stamps. The customers have had to pay £5 for it. Obviously, your reputation, if people think you're using a counterfeit stamp, it's very concerning indeed.
And do you know what you did, Jessica? You saw something and you decided to join the dots together and investigate, unlike the post office scandal where there were dots that were just not being joined together, so well done.
Thousands of postmasters all being done for forgery. It didn't occur to anyone there.
Really interesting.
Well done, very good story.
Yeah, let us know
if it's one of your stamps and you've got them and you can feel that they don't right, go to the post office and sort it out, because you're entitled to your money back.
We've got this little QR code here. Talking of barcodes, if you want to see the full investigation, you can scan the QR code on the screen right now. Go to gbnews.com and you can see the story put together by our brilliant team of investigative journalists, and let us know if you also have been affected by this.
Well done, Jessica. Very good story. Now, still to come, why are hairdressing salons getting the chop? Who wrote that? Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news now. It is 11:24. The man who killed 3 people in a spate of attacks in Nottingham has had his not guilty plea accepted on the grounds of diminished responsibility due to mental illness. This is just some breaking news. Triple killer Valdo Callaghan's manslaughter plea has been accepted. We're seeing the pictures of the people that he murdered. Of course, you will remember we were live on air when these shocking attacks happened in Nottingham. If you remember, there were the students. It was the university area of the town, and we had footage. In fact, we spoke to an eyewitness on the day who was in his student accommodation when the police were just outside of his window. That's right. So the gentleman who was arrested for these, he's had his plea, his guilty plea, accepted on the grounds of diminished responsibility due to mental illness. We'll have more reaction to that throughout the day. I imagine that comes as no comfort whatsoever to the families of those murdered.
Now, and we, as talked earlier, hairdressers calling on the government to cut VAT, as half of salon owners say they're considering literally shutting up shop.
That's right. A survey from Salon Employers Association also found that nearly 1 in 5 hairdressers have admitted that they're close to having a mental and emotional breakdown.
Well, let's talk to the co-founder of the Salon Employers Association, Toby Dicker. Toby, half of them I think may have a mental breakdown. Is it really that bad?
I'm afraid to say that it is at the moment. I mean, first of all, thank you very, very much for having us on, because we're not often taken very seriously, and have a serious news broadcaster like yourselves give us the chance to explain things is great. But we were shocked by the results. It's absolutely desperate in our industry at the moment. We've been trying to make this point for several years to Department for Business, Her Majesty's Treasury, and other ministers that we have these challenges. And, you know, it's a really, really bad out there. And most people don't want to admit it. We're a proud industry. We don't want to admit that things are bad. But everybody I talk to is talking about laying off MVQ, apprentices, so on. And it's a scary time. We've come together along.
But Toby, you've had this VAT. Toby, sorry to interrupt. You've had this VAT problem for a long time. Why suddenly now is it becoming a big issue?
Very good point. What's happened in our industry, and what can't happen in other industries, is that all of the taxes that go to or that come onto a different business add up in a fair way. But when they are applied to hairdressing, which is a service-based business, we actually end up paying 35 to 40p in the pound for every pound that comes in the door.
Wow.
And what that's led to is a massive change to self-employment, and 70% of our sector now have moved to self-employment, but they no longer train people and bring MVQ students in. And what that means is that each of them individually can stay below the VAT threshold of 85,000. Now, that wouldn't be possible for sectors. So if you had a restaurant, for instance, you couldn't have 10 different people serving you your meal, making your meal, and staying under that VAT threshold. But that's what's happened in our industry. And I understand why people have done it, but I also think that possibly there's a legal implication to doing so, and that's what gives us the fear. We feel we're being penalised for doing the right thing.
And you're not wrong, Toby. I completely agree with you. And do you know what else happened? Lockdowns. So I, for one, started dyeing my own hair in lockdowns, and I have continued to do so. You've stopped dyeing your hair, actually, as well. You know, we developed new habits, didn't we, in lockdown, unfortunately. And also, just correct me if I'm wrong, but there seem to be more barbers on high streets now, but less of your traditional hairdressers. What's going on there?
There's some debate around what's happening there. Most of those businesses are taking cash and not taking bookings. So I'll let you read into that what you will. I'm not talking about all barbers, because there's some amazing barbers.
Yeah.
Just to say, they're actually part of a group organisation called the Personal Care Sector Organisational Group. And we have the Men's Hairdressing Federation, the Hair and Barber Council, Freelance Hairdressers Association, and the Fellowship of British Hairdressing is also as part of our organisation. We represent about 50,000 people. We're looking at people that do the right thing and fighting on that. I don't want to besmirch or have a go at any part of the sector. I just want to show that if you're doing the right thing, you're paying roughly 125% more tax than a business is not doing so. Yeah.
Are you getting any cut-throughs with government? Rishi Sunak, of course, has got a very fine head of hair. Keir Starmer's got a pretty good head of hair too. I mean, are they listening, ministers, or not?
Look, ministers are listening and they understand certain things, but I don't think they're in this every day with us. You know, we've spoken to the business minister, we've spoken to the apprenticeship and skills minister, and if they had a bit more time, then they could probably understand the argument better. And I think off the record, they understand a lot of the problems we have, but politically it's quite difficult to make manoeuvres.
But also,
I would
I was going to say, Toby, the other thing is as well, you need those MPs to believe in the service that hairdressers offer that goes beyond just making your hair look nice. It's about, especially for the elderly, and we have this thematically, this comes up time and time again, the lady that wants to go in and have a cup of coffee and have a chat and sit and have that human contact. And we need MPs to realise that what you offer actually is more than just a short back and sides.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think on top of that, hairdressers are really the backbone of the high street. They're the thing that brings people into the high street every day, and yet we pay more tax than anyone else on the high street. It doesn't make any sense. And I've asked many times for proper studies to be done and look at different business models, and that hasn't been forthcoming. I think it's a scary thing, like you say. What we're offering is that mental health thing, but also bringing 80, 100 people every day, every week into the salons, and bringing those past shops that are on the high street. And crisis in our high street as it is. We know that hospitality are asking for this. The reason we didn't get a cut last time, we believe, is because we were badly represented. And I think it's time now to have a serious discussion with politicians. And I'd love to have a one if you can
Who
help
cuts your hair, Toby?
Well, we will back you, Toby.
I want to know who cuts his hair. He's got a great head of hair.
Himself.
Who does your hair?
Well, that's very kind. I'm very kind. I've just been styled, as we asked, by one of my great team, Sean Dawson, did my hair. But I have a selection of great hairdressers, and they all have a go at it from time.
All right, that's Toby Dicker, who's the co-founder of the Salon Employers Association. He's right, actually. They are a magnet to the high street.
Everything. You go and get your hair done, but then you might go into the other shop and get a cup of coffee, and then you buy a loaf of bread. That's if you can park your car, of course, which takes on to that. And you might pop into the charity shop and get something there. We lose them at our peril, don't we? Right, still to come this morning, common sense. Kemi Badenoch pledges to intervene as companies are told to collect data based on how workers identify rather than their biological sex. What was that noise, Andrew Pearce?
Groan. Groan.
That and much
Here we
more.
go again.
After your morning's news with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you very much. We start this bulletin with some breaking news. A man who killed 3 people in a spate of attacks in Nottingham has had his not guilty plea accepted on the grounds of diminished responsibility due to mental illness. 32-year-old Valdo Calacane, also known as Adam Mendez, instead pled guilty to manslaughter in November. He killed university students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Coomer and school caretaker Ian Coates in June last year. He also admitted to trying to murder 3 pedestrians who were hit by a van on the morning of the attacks. British strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen are designed to send a clear message, that's according to the Foreign Secretary. British aircraft used precision-guided bombs to strike several targets near an airfield in the capital, Sana'a. The UK and the US have been patrolling areas in the Red Sea after a spate of attacks on commercial ships by Iranian-backed militants. Israel's proposing a 2-month ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for all hostages being released. The US news outlet Axios reports that the proposal, made via Qatari and Egyptian mediators, does not include an agreement to end the war. Israel's Defense Forces announced that 24 of its soldiers were killed yesterday, its deadliest day since the start of the war with Hamas. And another storm is sweeping across Britain, bringing fresh disruption for commuters just a day after Storm Isha. The Met Office says Storm Joslin will bring strong winds, with amber and yellow alerts issued for much of the country. Yellow warnings for rain and ice are also in place across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. TransPennine Express is among several train operators warning of disruption. It's urging passengers to avoid travelling between England and Scotland from 3 o'clock this afternoon. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Roslin Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2713 and €1.1694. The price of gold is £1,593.72 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 at 7,474 points.
Roslin Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at midday, Good Afternoon Britain with Ben and Emily, and they are there with us in the studio now.
Hello, good morning to you. Good to see you.
Good morning.
What are you doing then?
We've got quite a show coming up
You always
for
do.
you. We always do. We always do. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Houthi rebel strikes and the UK and the US military action. I'm quite interested in what you make of this whole Keir Starmer and the Labour Party saying they weren't briefed in time and that they should have been briefed sooner and, you know, all of this.
Also, fresh off the back of Starmer prancing around Estonia in his military jacket, you know, acting like some sort of
we're getting a statement at 12:30 anyway.
I know, exactly.
It's exactly the same as what they did a few days ago. Do we have to have a statement every time?
But I guess the big question is whether we have the capabilities for some kind of prolonged military action. And, you know, escalation in the Middle East doesn't always go in our favour.
We can't repel small boats in the Channel, so how are we going to do that?
This is what I say. We used to rule Britannia, rule the waves. We can't stop rubber dinghies.
No.
Now we don't have that song anymore.
We don't have any jets to send to the Red Sea.
No sailors.
And so Rishi Sunak's going to make this statement in your show, isn't he? At 12:30.
Yeah, we'll be live from the Commons, so not to be missed.
And also, we're going to have a big, fat debate on the House of Lords. Because, of course, they're throwing up obstacles.
That Bishop of Gloucester.
They them.
They them the Lord.
Yeah, the first woman bishop who then, her first thing she said as bishop was, don't think God's a man.
Well, I think she's probably right about that.
How does she know?
But how do you know?
I don't.
She's probably got a hotline to him more than you have.
Why would your first statement, as a theological statement as a bishop, say, not sure, that 2,200-year teaching?
Why are bishops trying to be edgy?
Yeah.
What's all that about? What's all that about? Well, we could debate that.
Yes, exactly.
Are bishops too edgy these
Abolish
days?
the bishops.
Well, I wouldn't allow any of them to have a seat in the House of Lords.
Well, that's interesting. And also, have you heard about this weight loss treatment? It's a weight loss pill, and it essentially is a capsule that contains a gastric balloon.
I've heard about that.
And it's filled with water, so this is, you know, something, an alternative to a
terrifying.
Yeah.
So you swallow it, expands in your tummy.
Apparently so.
What about just not eating as much and maybe going to the gym? That sounds like
so old-fashioned, Ben Lear. What are you talking about?
Is that a bigoted view these days?
Some people struggle with their food, you know.
Stop eating.
Yeah,
Black coffee's good
it's not
for
always
suppressing
easy for
appetite.
people, is it?
Well, I don't
It's not
buy
always
that.
easy.
I don't buy it.
You don't buy it?
Put the cookies down.
People have eating disorders, Ben.
Very few have genuine.
He's got no
More of this
And in
from
mouth
12
disease.
o'clock. Emily and Ben, thank you. Right, for now, though, don't go anywhere. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
She's
Quick
going to
break.
talk about that sex book. She can't wait.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yours Britain's News when GB News' Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. They're back in the studio. Nigel Nelson, our senior political correspondent, and Tonya Buxton.
Shall we go straight in with the children's sex book scandal? Because I have been reading this all morning and I am not easily shocked, OK? I'm a big believer in having difficult conversations, particularly with children, about issues which might protect them. But this book, Tonya, which is called Welcome to Sex by Dr. Melissa Kang and Yumi Steins, they're both Australians, has the branding of kind of cartoons. It looks like it probably would appeal to a primary school, even a nursery-aged child. It's supposed to be for teens. But if you look at the images...
Because you can buy it on Amazon from 10 years old.
Yeah. But you could buy it from 8 years old from Amazon,
Yeah.
couldn't you?
Yeah.
Who would stop them?
The images are very, very childlike anyway. But it says things like, it's sort of issues about having sex, and it's trying to, sexting and the law. Some of the stuff that I find most disturbing is about the tech influence with digital. It says there are laws to protect young people and children from being abused by adults. This is about sending pictures online. But it can get messy if you or your partner are under 18. It can get messy. There's no sense in which it's safeguarding here about keeping children safe. It says sex is not necessarily going to be good the first time. It's going to be awkward, especially if it's with someone who is of the opposite gender to you. It's the normalising of, well, homosexuality, fine. Homosexuality should be normalised. But it's almost like the presumption here is that you aren't necessarily going to have sex with somebody of the same gender.
But it's also why...
Sorry, of the opposite gender.
Yeah, but that's a fair presumption, isn't it? I mean, what they're talking about is to show children that as they grow up, it may be they will choose to have same-sex relationships. I don't think that's a problem. I mean, the issue I've got with it is whether or not it's age-appropriate. And it felt to me, I mean, that Tonya and myself have been going through the book before we came in, and so we haven't read every word, but just looking at it, if anything, it should be a guide for parents to use that to talk to their kids about sex when they ask the questions.
There are things in here that have blown my mind. I mean, I'm showing pictures to Andrew Pearce.
I had to ask what one of these words meant, and I thought I'd been around the block once or twice. I didn't know what it meant.
There's a lot of very graphic images. Go on, Tonya.
No, the point of this is take it right back. This is sexualising children. I wonder whether Yumi Tasma and Dr. Melissa Kang have... I mean, in my opinion, someone who writes this type of book for infants, you know, under 10 years old, 8 years old, 7 years, do they have paedophile qualities about them? I don't know, because I wouldn't... we're mothers. Did you ever think about talking about sex with your 7, 8, 9-year-old? Was that necessary? It is not. And one of the things that all psychologists say is, once you sexualise the mind of a child, the younger you sexualise them, the more likely they are going to have problems with intimacy as they get older.
Yeah.
So what they're doing here is damaging, and it seems to be setting out some kind of weird agenda they call normal girls and boys, or normal women women and men, cis. I refuse to be called cis. I am just a woman.
But that is the term. That is the term being used.
No, it's not the term. It's incorrect, and I won't tolerate it.
Who decided to use this word?
Academics.
I think it was academics.
But most people watching this programme don't use the term cis. No, they don't.
But because
99% don't.
Because the transgender debate is...
No, you want to be called a trans woman, then you're a trans woman. I am not a cis woman. I am pure woman, and you are trans woman. You're changing your mind or coming up with
I do want to say...
Just remind me what cis woman is supposed to be.
A biological woman.
Who's born... No, well, they identify as the sex in which they were born.
Yes,
but just to be...
It's a woman.
Biological woman.
We are, to the minds of academics who work in this area, we are cisgendered. We're all cisgendered, actually.
Yeah,
it's not about your sexuality, it's about your gender. But
you're happy with the gender you were born
I just want to say, as the authors are not here to defend themselves, there is no suggestion that they have paedophilic tendencies.
Oh, gosh. No, I said my opinion. That was my opinion. Anybody who wants to write this type of sexual stuff for kids as young as 8, it worries me. It worries me what goes through their mind, because this is not helpful. Talking about oral sex, anal sex, all the things that they're talking about, the different acts of sex, the different parts of their bodies, the different ways that different people have sex, for 8 to 10-year-olds is wrong on every single level. There is no correctness here.
But could it not help parents to answer questions? I'm agreeing with you about the age appropriateness of it, and so the idea of an 8-year-old picking it up and reading it all the way through, I would find quite disturbing. But if a parent had got hold of the book and gone through it, and that helped that parent to answer questions as and when they come up.
But this is for children. This is aimed for the children to read.
Look at the you three are parents. Do 9-year-olds very often ask their parents about oral sex?
No.
No, and that's what I mean about the age appropriateness of it. It's unlikely that issue would come up until a bit later in your teens. But a book like this, looking at some of, as I say, I've not read every word, but looking at some of the advice that's given, it seems to be quite straightforward. And if you were a parent trying to explain to your child the answer to a question, it might well help that.
Do you know what I think I find most disturbing that is missing from this? It's the idea of intimacy.
Yes.
A relationship.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
Privacy.
Yeah.
Age-appropriate language and behaviour. This is
all of that.
Incredibly liberal.
It's just about having sex and getting off, and sex feels nice. And that's, you know, actually, sex is laden with lots of things if it's not done in the right atmosphere at the right age.
It's very cavalier, Tonya, also about online sex, where children can be groomed by paedophiles and all sorts.
But that's what kids are facing. The whole thing is that's what kids are facing nowadays.
But it doesn't. There's no warning here, Nigel, about it.
Well, I think again, looking at some of the bits I've seen, there is a warning that this is the kind of thing that can happen.
But they're not saying to be careful of it. They're saying it gets messy. That's the language they're using. What does that mean?
What they mean is you might end up in prison, but they're not using the clear language. It could get complicated. It could get messy if you send an image of your naked self to your boyfriend with your face in it, and he sends one back, and you're both under 16. Be really clear about it. That's breaking the law.
It is breaking the law. Yeah.
And that's not what they're saying.
And also, even when it's not breaking the law and you are over 16, the advice on that should be, it's not really a wise thing to do. Don't do it. Most people have great regrets when they do things like that. Don't do it. Not just include it and make it like the norm. They are making sexual practices for underage children the norm here, which I find extremely worrying.
Yeah, and it's about being in a vacuum with no emotional, moral...
And if it was a small sex guide for parents to help their kids, why is it 300 pages? It's like it's probably longer than the Kama Sutra.
Well, you might know. Right, moving on.
God.
Alzheimer's blood test, another health issue, really. Tonya, if you knew you were going to get Alzheimer's in 10 to 15 years, would you want to have a screening?
Yep.
Would you? I'm surprised.
Yep, because there's a member of my family, we're going through this at the moment, and I would want to have total control. I would not deal with it. You know, I don't want to be around when I'm not myself, and so I'd like to have the information in order to do what I can. But also, what I find worrying about this is that I think there's a lot of people, I know that you don't want to know, but there are people that do want to know, and the way that they're kind of talking about it is, or maybe we can make it do another drug, like with statins or something like that. And I have my own concerns about statins and hormones and things like that. What should we be saying here is, if you are likely to have this, these are correct effective life measures that you can make.
Right.
That's the thing that they're not saying here.
Yeah.
So I know that, you know, if it'd be difficult actually for someone like me, if I found out that in 15 years' time I'm going to get Alzheimer's dementia, it would be hard for me because I do live quite a clean life. But most people eat processed food, they drink too much, they smoke, they don't exercise. All of these things, especially if it's to do, you know, with vascular dementia, you can make a really big difference to your life. You can actually reverse it.
Wouldn't you feel there's a terrible shadow hanging over your life?
Well, hang on, but
I need to get my things in order. I've got 4 children. I need to get everything in order.
Any medical screening, isn't it? I mean, whether you have a mammogram, whether you have a blood test annually, all the various things we go through that older people get, bowel cancer screening, there's lung screening. It seems to me that on something like this, A, it's no different, and B, if
these things are going to kill you.
Well,
Alzheimer's isn't the killer.
Well, it is, I think, ultimately, isn't it?
It's often related.
It can be, but the important thing is, if you catch it early, you may well be able to, and this is the argument that's been forward, you may be able to treat the symptoms of it
with
better.
drugs.
And if it turns up further down the line, there is some kind of cure that's developed, you will be caught early before it's too late. So all you're doing is being forewarned that this is on the horizon.
Which is just terrifying to me, because I think if you were having a screening for bowel cancer because maybe you had some symptoms, then you know that you're developing it, then you treat it at that time. That's what you mean. So
no, I don't. I mean, but bowel cancer screening for older people is every 3 years.
But then that would tell you that you are facing it imminently, not you're going to get it in 15 years' time.
No, that's true. I mean,
that's the bit I have a problem with.
It will detect it early.
It will detect and help you but you'd have to change your lifestyle. I don't agree with that saying.
Oh no, I wouldn't want to.
Oh, you would?
No, because I'm a bit like you. I live healthily anyway. I can't do much more, probably drink a bit less. I can't do that much more to live more healthily. So I would just have this cloud living. I could get hit by a bus on the way home today. And so why would I be preparing for something that I can't control in 15 years' time?
But you probably could do something about it now, or in the event that you are on the likely list. I mean, it's not saying you will get this. It's saying that you are likely to get it.
It says that this test has 95% accuracy, and because it's to do with an enzyme, a protein, p-tau27, and if you've got that, then it attacks your neurons. So the accuracy is actually quite high. And they don't have any treatment here, they say, for Alzheimer's, which is worrying, but which they shouldn't be writing that in the paper, because there is treatment for Alzheimer's.
They are coming down the line.
You know, no, but it's lifestyle.
Yeah.
The thing is,
I
it's
agree.
lifestyle.
Do the crossword.
It's about doing the crossword, and it's about anti-inflammatory lifestyle, anti-inflammatory food. You can make an incredible difference to your life if you do that.
Yeah.
And we're not told this enough across the board.
And that's what worries me, because all I can see is pharmaceutical companies who are going to then bombard me. If I test positive for this thing, I'm going to be bombarded by adverts for 15 years telling me how they're going to cure my Alzheimer's with a pill. I just don't want to know.
Well, it should be a private test. I don't think that other companies should know about it. You would then decide with your GP what you do about it.
And is this test, Sonia, is it going to be on the NHS? Or
well, they're saying that they're going to be offering it to screen all over 50s. This is what they're going to do, a blood test.
A stamp it, that's enormous expense.
I think half the country will be like me, stick their head in the sand, won't they?
I think a lot of people won't want to know. I mean, I definitely would want to know to get my life in order and to really step up, you know, whatever else I can do. And I know that I don't want to exist without being me.
Imagine how suggestive you would be, though, because if you just sort of forget your keys, which I do on a regular basis, you would then be, this is it, it's happening. I'd be on my edge all the time. Anyway, right, I think we're done. Thank you so much, Nigel and Tonya. That is it from Britain's Newsroom today. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Ben and Emily today. See you tomorrow.
See you then.
Yes, it is indeed. Coming up, we'll be crossing live to the House of Commons at about 12:30 because the Prime Minister is going to be giving a statement on the strikes, the retaliatory strikes on the Houthi rebels overnight. Fears of escalation. Could we see a prolonged military campaign?
And a big interview with Donald Trump's former comms director, Anthony Scaramucci. The Mooch is with us live. Don't miss it.
That's after the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. The weather stays stormy, with Joslin the next on the list, arriving through the rest of the day, bringing spells of rain and then increasing winds. overnight and into Wednesday morning. This is Storm Joslin, a very large area of low pressure with tightly packed isobars. The strongest of the winds later on will be across the north and the west of the UK. The heaviest of the rain will be through the early part of the afternoon. Some very wet weather across western hills of Scotland, northwest England and Wales. Rain warnings in force, 50 millimetres in some spots that could cause some issues. Not a huge amount of rain further south, but there will be a lot of cloud and an increasing wind, so that's not going to make it feel very pleasant, even if temperatures are above average for the time of year. The main bands of rain move through overnight, followed by showers, and it's at this point that the wind really picks up into the early hours of Wednesday. 80-mile-per-hour gusts threatening north and west Scotland, 55 to 65 elsewhere. A notch down on Storm Isha, but could cause impacts given the repair and recovery work that's ongoing from Storm Isha. Stays blustery into Wednesday morning, further showers or longer spells of rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Eventually the showers becoming fewer, and there will be some sunshine further south for a time before some wetter weather arrives by the end of the day into Wales and the southwest, staying mild if rather windy.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of